When I was preparing this morning, on your website, you have a Kawasaki GPT. And so I thought I would do a little practice interview. I asked it this question. I said, I'm interviewing Guy Kawasaki this afternoon. If I only had one question to ask, what should I ask? And it recommended I ask, what's the single most important lesson you've learned about being remarkable in your career? And how can others apply it to their lives? Now, before you answer, do you want to hear what Kawasaki GPT said? Or do you want to give your answer?
I'll give my answer, and you can tell me if I agree with myself.
My name's Joel, and I'm a recovering nerd. I've spent the last 25 years bouncing between creative jobs and technical teams. I worked at places like Nickelodeon to NASA, and a few others that started with different letters. I was one of the first couple hundred people podcasting back in the early aughts until I accidentally became an IT analyst. Thankfully, somebody in the government said, hey, you're a nerd that talks good. And that spun me off into the world of startups, branding, and marketing for the same sort of researchers and startup founders that I used to hang out with. Today, I help technical people learn how to get noticed, get remembered, and get results. On Nerds That Talk Good, I want to help you do the same. I talk with some of the greatest technical communicators, facilitators, and thinkers that I know who are behind the big brands and the tech talk that just works. A special note, if you happen to be listening to this on the regular podcast audio feed, there's a video that accompanies this. So you can go to the episode page or you can go over to YouTube. I probably put a lot more time into this than I needed to, but I just couldn't resist seeing my face right next to Guy Kawasaki. So head on over there. Otherwise, here we go. Today's guest nerd is the original tech evangelist. Before Thought Leader was even a LinkedIn title and before Apple was a lifestyle brand, Guy Kawasaki was out there preaching the gospel of the Macintosh, turning early adopters into true believers. Guy is a Silicon Valley legend, a former Apple fellow, and chief evangelist of Canva. He's the best-selling author of The Art of the Start, Enchantment and Wise Guy, and the host of the Remarkable People podcast. And his latest book right up here behind me, Think Remarkable, comes out of that podcast. It's amazing. I'm very inspired by that guy. But more than just titles and books, Guy makes people feel the value of a product before they even understand how it works. So if you're a nerd who's ever struggled to explain your big idea, buckle up. Guy is going to show you how to talk so good that people follow, believe, and evangelize with you. Let's get into it. Guy, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you. So first, a little correction here. I am not the original tech evangelist. Mike Boych hired me into Apple, so he's really evangelist number one. Of course, you could make the case that even before Mike Boych, there was Jesus. So it was Jesus, 2,000-year gap, Mike Boych, 1-year gap, Guy Kawasaki.
Okay.
That's the history of evangelism.
Credit where credit's due. And that's what I really want to talk about. I want to give a little background about how we almost met. And you don't even know this. Many, many, many years ago, you were giving your Art of Innovation speech to the International Association of Business Communicators in Toronto. I was working for the federal government at the time, and I was so disillusioned with mission, vision, value statements, blah, 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 corporate bullshit. And I was so inspired by your talk. And then we were on the same flight back to the States. And I was so starstruck, I did not say hello. So it's been a long time coming. I've been following you for many, many years.
So, and when was this?
I think it was 2011, 2009.
So this is before Canada became the 51st state.
That's right. That's well before that happened. But something happened on that stage, and you seeded an idea in my head that eventually inspired me many, many years later to develop my methodology and the way that I help nerds talk good through the card deck that I do. And it's right here in the yellow. It's the concept of mantras, which I have a book coming out in 2 weeks that I talk about this. And I realized while doing the proofreading and doing some email searching that I got the idea from you and I didn't even acknowledge you in the book. So I have to rectify that. I've got a copy coming out to you. And then you were gracious enough to agree to come on. So thank you so much.
I would not lose any sleep about not having acknowledged me. So, listen, as a business writer, as a business speaker, we're all ripping each other off.
That's right.
There are no new ideas. But I have a question. I just noticed what you did. How did you do that thing where you moved yourself off and you brought your card deck into the frame?
Well, I'm a recovering theater guy, and so I have an Elgato Stream Deck and a multiple camera setup here because when you're communicating, you got to get people's attention. And I got tired of sucky, boring old Zooms and decided,
Wait. So back up. So I use Squadcast too, and Squadcast is directly connected to one camera.
yes,
So are you telling me that you have two cameras connected to an Elgato deck, and then
Elgato Stream Deck.
you just flip between the two?
Yep.
And so from Squadcast point of view, it's just one feed, but at the deck level, you control which
right.
cameras used.
Oh, I can do much more than that. I can bring up my core. You're talking about ripping off the masters. Emotion, logic, and credibility is Aristotle, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs is how we communicate our technology. So
Well, I would say it's time well spent ripping off Aristotle and Maslow, but not Guy Kawasaki.
no, and so that's why I wanted to come on, publicly apologize, give you full credit. But what I really wanted to talk about was tech evangelism. So when I left the federal government and joined my first startup, they weren't paying me very well. So they said, "What title do you want?" I said, "I want to be the risk evangelist." I said, "I don't want to be a sales guy. I don't want to do marketing. What I really want to do is get people into believing what we're trying to do." And I patterned it off a lot of you. So I'd love for you to just open with your nerd origin story. How did you get from where you were to where you are, and getting that start?
The one word answer is nepotism. Mike Boych, the first evangelist for Macintosh, I was his very good friend in college. And so if you looked at my background in terms of educational work experience, I was from the jewelry business. I had a major in psychology. So I did not have the work experience. I did not have the educational credentials. I had nepotism, and nepotism is a powerful force. So the short answer to how I got my job is nepotism.
But your background in psychology, and you walked into and immediately walked back out of law school and selling the jewelry must have taught you something about the art of persuasion. It must have taught you more about people than the developers at Apple.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is true. I wasn't totally unqualified for the job. So I went to law school for about 2 weeks. I quit. And then I went back to Hawaii, where I'm from. And then I worked there. And the following academic year, I went and got an MBA at UCLA. And that was a 4-day-a-week program. So I come from a lower middle income family. I needed money. So I started working for a jewelry company that manufactured fine jewelry. And that is truly hand-to-hand combat industry. I think many people tend to think of sales as, let's do an A/B test on our whole page. And, if we make the link blue or if we make the link red, do we get a 1% upside in number of clicks or something? But I hate to burst people's bubbles. That's not selling.
Right.
Okay. Selling is hand to hand analog combat. And that's what I learned in the jewelry business. And that has been the most valuable experience for the rest of my life, even if it's digital evangelism.
So do you consider yourself more of a communicator who loves tech, or a techie who learned to communicate? Where's the chicken and egg on that one then?
I would say that I am a product driven, product loving marketer. That I am not a techie. I'm not a programmer. I don't understand the ones and the zeros, and I don't understand, like large language models, how they work and all that kind of stuff. But I can market that shit.
Were you always a good speaker? How'd you learn the stagecraft?
That's a myth that speakers are born. Speakers are made, and what makes a speaker is repetition. So, I mean, as you can imagine, working in the Macintosh division, you had, let's say, someone to look up to called Steve Jobs. And So that's the positive way of saying that you had this great role model. More accurately, that's like maybe one of the most intimidating people in the world to work for if you ever wanted to make a tech presentation, because he was the greatest tech presenter in the history of man. And when he did his demos, they worked. I mean, if he had a Tesla and he said the glass is bulletproof and he threw something at the glass would not break. Okay. He would know how to do that. So the fact is that he was very intimidating to work for, very inspiring at the same time. So it was it was kind of spooky to start speaking, knowing that Steve Jobs is hovering around someplace. And I started speaking in 1987 or so, and I have probably given, well, let's see, 87 to the day. Let's call that, 40 years. 40 years, 50 speeches a year. That's 2,000 speeches. So yeah, let's say I gave a 2,000 speeches. And now I got good before I reached the 1,999. But I would say it took hundreds of speeches to get where I am.
Yeah. I find with a lot of, especially technical communicators, technical creators today, they're chasing a message. They put something out there, try it once, it doesn't work, and they pivot and they shift. And that consistency, I think, is so important. How
Well,
did you develop that consistency? Or were you
trial and error.
throwing spaghetti every time?
Well, I for a while I was throwing spaghetti, but there's two things that you can control. It's the kind of spaghetti you're throwing and the wall you're throwing it against. I
Mm,
tried to control both. So, as a tip to nerds who want to demonstrate and speak, I will tell you this, that I think many people, when they're demonstrating technology, they want to demonstrate the what. In other words, the final result. And so let's use a situation where you're demonstrating Canva. The temptation will be, let me show you this great 16 by 9 presentation. Let me show you this great Instagram background. Let me show you this great Etsy store, photo album and all that. And I think the problem with that is that with enough time and training and expertise, almost any product can create a great graphic output. It could be Photoshop, it could be Illustrator, it could be Canva, it could be 25 other things. So if you focus on the what, you're going to be in a 25-way tie that, 25 other things can create a beautiful picture. So what you should do as a nerd is not focus on the what, not the final result. You focus on the how. So I can take Canva and I can show you in 30 seconds how I can make a great graphic. You cannot do that in Photoshop. So what's crucial for nerds when you want to show a product is you show how your product gets to the what, not the what, the end itself, because everybody can produce a great what.
You often open with a bold claim and then back it up. This is part of your tell then show approach, right? So someone trying to pitch or demo their product, where did that come from? Because quite often, going all the way back to our friend throwing bricks against car glass, it doesn't always have the backup. So is that a function of just the storytelling and praying, or do you really have to know your shit technically as well? You can't.
Listen, you have to ask that question. I mean,
Well, I work with a lot of startups who have great ideas and great visions. Like, how do you temper those expectations but still get people excited?
well, I mean, if you have good shit, you don't want to temper those expectations. You want those expectations to be high. Now, in this case, we're referring to, it is inconceivable to me that you would have a demo where you have your VP of technology or whatever say, yeah, we got bulletproof glass and he throws this thing and the glass cracks. I mean, I just like, what alternate planet are you living on that says you're going to do a demo in front of millions of people and the glass might crack? I mean, did you not rehearse that about
Yeah.
15 times to know the glass would not crack? And so that's not the company that I would depend on, fully automated driving. If you can't figure out, you can throw something against the glass and it won't crack. But yeah, you want me to take my hands off the wheel and let the car drive? I don't think so. And
Yeah.
I sure as hell am not going to Mars with you or let you put a chip in my head. But anyway, so getting back to these nerds, can I give you more tips for nerds to talk about products?
Absolutely. That's why we're here.
Okay, so tip number one is focus on the how, not the what. Focus number two is never use acronyms in your industry. Never. I mean, you always think that, wow, everybody in this audience is totally sophisticated. So I can say, yeah, we support IEEE standards, or, we have SQL calls, or we have Python, or, whatever. And SNA and USB-C 3 and all that. And you should never use those kind of terms. You should never assume people understands all the terms in your business. So that's tip number two. Tip number three is to apply what I call the opposite test. So there's a temptation when you introduce your product that you think you're doing it isolated and uniquely. And so what you say, you stand up. Let's say you have enterprise software, then you stand up and you say, I have patent pending, curve jumping, paradigm shifting, easy to use, bug-free software. And you think, oh my God, I just blew everybody out of the water because nobody else is going to say that. Well, I hate to tell you, but the person before you and the person after you is also going to say, I have patent pending, curve jumping, paradigm shifting, innovative, bug free, industry standard supporting, easy to use, well documented software. Everybody says the same thing. So the test for you is the opposite test, which is look at the adjectives that you're using, look at the statements that you're using, and ask yourself, is our competition saying the opposite of what I'm saying? So to be facetious, if you're demonstrating enterprise software and you're saying it's patent pending, curve jumping, paradigm shifting, innovative, bug free, easy to use, well documented software, are you telling me that your competition is standing up and saying, well, we have a piece of shit, it's slow, buggy, not well documented, it doesn't scale, it's copycat, it's trailing edge, it's premature? Because if your competition is saying that, then okay, God bless you. Say it's patent pending, curve jumping, paradigm shifting, innovative, revolutionary software. But odds are they're saying the same thing as you. So apply the opposite test to everything you're saying so that you are different. And if you can't do that, maybe what you have sucks. Another tip for you, I want, whenever you say something to the audience, I want you to pretend there's a little person sitting on your shoulder, okay? And whenever you make a statement like, we support IEEE standards for compression, let's just say you say that, right, about your software. And then this little person on your shoulder says, so what? And you've got to answer that question because you think, wow, I just made this really dynamic, powerful statement. We support IEEE compression standard. So freaking what? You got to answer that question.
I love it. Yeah, and I have cards in my deck called the focus cards. These are kind of my Uno reverses, which are like, if you're talking about a big idea and I see any acronyms, I'm going to tell you to strip it. Or, so here's your so what card. And, can you own this? Can anybody else say this? And I have found that these have been the best things because they're non-confrontational. And if I'm doing a workshop and somebody's writing down these, I just kind of slip that over to them. You don't have to call them
Okay.
out.
I'll give you another card to make.
I will, and I'll put your name on it.
Just like you attributed me before. Your track record is somewhat suspect here.
I know.
Okay. So, I mean, people call this the magic quadrant, but it is a 2 by 2 matrix, right? And this 2 by 2 matrix on vertical axis, you measure how valuable it is that what you're doing, how useful is your product or service. On the other axis, it's how unique is your service. Is a lot of people do this or only you do that? So in this 2 by 2 world, the only quadrant that matters is you do something valuable and unique. So if you're a nerd and you're writing a product or you're making a product and you're introducing this product, ask yourself, how do I get into that corner where my product is unique and valuable? Because that's where history is made. So I'll give you a very good example. When the iPod first came out, that was truly unique and valuable because there was no other device that had a user interface that a mere mortal could operate, that had a wide selection of music, that the music was inexpensive at 99 cents a song. It could hold 10,000 of these things, and the music was legal. There
Right.
was nothing that could say that. So that made iPod unique and valuable. So you have to ask yourself, what makes my gizmo unique and valuable? And if you cannot come up with an answer to that, you are in trouble. And you should realize that right away.
But at the same time, it wasn't a brand new category. I see way too many people saying, we've got no competition at all. And I'm like, well, that's great. That means there's no market and nobody's trying to go after what you're going
Exactly.
after.
When I hear people say there's no competition at all, there's only two logical conclusions. One is what you mentioned, which is that's because there's no market and nobody wants to do this dumbass thing. That's explanation number one. Explanation number two is you are so freaking clueless. You don't know how to use Google or Chat GPT. You are so freaking stupid. You don't know there's 10 other companies doing that. And that also makes you not a good investment because you don't do good competitive analysis.
Yeah.
And those are the only two choices.
I tell a lot of my clients, I'm like, if you think there's no competition, doing nothing is competition. Like just living with it. And if that's all you've got, then maybe you have to punch that up and make that the villain, right? You have to really own this. I call it the stinky sock problem. Like if I'm selling soap, I might say, well, I got a teenage son and we have a stinky sock problem at home, and 9 out of 10 families have a stinky sock problem, and pretty soon the person you're talking to goes, they didn't know they had that problem beforehand. So how do you uh, invent problems, or there are problems that are there, but how do you identify, put a name around them, and get people leaning in and realizing, yes, that's what I've been feeling this whole time? Is that logical, emotional? Where does
Yeah,
that come
well,
from?
I mean, in a sense, it's you're asking how do you develop empathy, right? Because I think the key concept here is you should work backwards from what the customer wants as opposed to forward from what you want or what you like to do. Because if you work backwards from the customer, you're pretty sure there's a need. Whereas if you work forward from what you want to do, it's not clear there is a need. Now, I'm going to completely contradict myself, but there is also a case to be made that if you are the customer, you truly know what the customer wants. So I would make the case that Apple started this way, that Steve Wozniak was not building an Apple One for a theoretical multi-billion dollar market of people who wanted a personal computer, because quite frankly, nobody knew what a personal computer was because there was nothing personal about computers back then. So he was building the computer he wanted to use, and luckily, he was not the only nutcase that wanted to use that. So I'm telling you, either work backwards from the customer or be the customer. And I think that is the surest path to making a product that will be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. But then also recognizing, if you're coming at it from the customer's perspective, that you're not the only customer. And sometimes that might be a market of one. It might be a market of 5 or 10, or there might be adjacent paths. And this is where pivots come in, and realizing, well, it can also do this. It can also do that without chasing. And I see a lot of companies chasing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what's a communication hill that you'll die on? Something that sounds minor but makes a huge difference in persuasion.
Oh, well, there's the Guy Kawasaki theory of presentation, which is you should have about 10 slides. You should be able to give those 10 slides in 20 minutes, and the smallest font should be 30 points. And I think that if everybody just believed that, the world would have much better presentations.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a fan as much of the PowerPoints and the slides, which is why I default to physicality. Putting something in somebody's hands is huge. So I would like to do, with your permission, a little bit of message therapy with Guy Kawasaki. I've selected 6 cards. I'm going to prompt you with one of the things. I want you to just answer the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
This is an exercise that I take a lot of my clients through. This is a big idea. What's an injustice in the world that you would like to correct? Briefly, in brief.
I would like to correct the fact that teachers in America are underappreciated.
That's awesome. I love that. Story. What do you hope people are saying about you when you're not around, and are you delivering on that?
I hope that people are saying that he is really a down to earth guy and he doesn't take himself too seriously.
Oh, I love that. A value. So a value proposition. This is a superpower. How do you empower your customers or the people that you work with? And give it a name. What's
Say
the
this
Guy,
again?
the Guy Kawasaki superpower? How do you empower the people that you work with, that you evangelize for?
Oh, how do I
How do
empower?
you do it? What's the value exchange from a superpower perspective?
What Guy Kawasaki can do is he can cut through the bullshit and get you the information short, sweet, and direct.
Oh, I
I
love that.
have very low toleration for bullshit. And I have very low toleration for bullshit coming from me too.
That's good. Keep holding yourself accountable. That is so important. A mantra, talking about our mantras. What phrase do you find yourself repeating often?
Okay, so first of all, I love that you have a mantra card as opposed to a mission card because I hate missions. Missions are bullshit. Missions are too long. A mantra is one word, 2 word, 3 words. So I have a mantra for my entire existence. And Guy's mantra for his existence is empower people. That's what I do. I empower people with my podcast appearances. I empower people with my podcast. I empower people with my writing, my speaking, my investing, my advising. I want to go down as someone who empowered people.
That's amazing. Well, on that, what wins? This is proof points. What wins have you had, and how do you celebrate them? We have quite a career. Where are those wins that really make you go,
I
yes?
mean, you could make the case that I helped Macintosh succeed. You could make the case that I helped Apple survive. You could make the case that I helped Canva become a success. You could also make the case that at the start of the career, there was Macintosh. At the end of your career, Guy, there was Canva. And the 30 years between those two things, you screwed up a lot. Hey, but listen, if you did Macintosh, that's good enough for a lifetime.
That
If you
was a
did
good, yeah.
Canva, that's good enough for a lifetime. If you did both, you really got lucky.
Yeah, yeah, and celebrate your failures as well. I mean, because they do teach you something. Last one, and the card deck's generally for technical companies, but this one is logic and credibility building. How does your solution or your process of evangelism simplify complex processes? What do you take people through? What's your process? Not to give away the secret sauce.
Well, I mean, in a sense, we've been discussing this whole thing, right? I mean, I told you that first of all, you got to make good shit. Secondly, you got to show people how your product works, not what it produces. And third, I'm telling you, mentally, you need to be in that corner where you're unique and valuable. So I've given you everything you need to know to make a successful product. I mean, at least at the high level now. I mean, what else can I do in 30 minutes? I mean,
Yeah, I want to peel back to your bookends, to Apple and Canva, which are two very successful, but simple to an extent, products, right? And what they really do, talking about empowering, is empower non-technical people. Is it accidental that is the focus of those companies, because they're much more complex computer programs, they're much more complex design programs, as you said, but Apple and Canva both targeting the non-technical and making their lives easier. Is that just part of who Guy is and you're attracted to that, or?
yeah, but I mean, I would push back on that, the technology behind Canva and Macintosh are very significant. So, but I would say that anything great can be reduced to very simple value proposition. I mean, let's say if I said, well, I became an evangelist for mRNA, and mRNA is this process of, developing vaccines very quickly. It's highly technical, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, mRNA makes the world a healthier place. You don't need a PhD in biochemistry to understand that mRNA and vaccination makes the world a better place, a safer place, a healthier place.
Yeah, and I think it's telling the story simply, not dumbing down, but not overwhelming, is the balance that you need for tech evangelism.
Well, I mean, people don't wake up in the morning saying, if only I had an IEEE standard compression algorithm built into a Python with using a stack that has been built with SQL on top of, I don't know, whatever, right?
Yeah.
User definable nano code. They want to be safer. They want to be smarter. They want to be sexier. They want to, they want to make graphics fast. They want to be more productive. They want to be more creative. These are not exactly, you don't need a PhD to understand those things.
All right, so I'm going to challenge you. From all the buzzwords that you've heard, what is one word, your favorite word, to cut from a sentence, to recommend somebody cut from their sentence?
Strategic.
Strategic. Ooh, yeah, we see that a heck of a lot. It means nothing.
It means absolutely. I tell you what it means. In most cases, when somebody says we're working on a strategic, and the second worst word is partnership, whenever you see the word strategic and partnership, in your mind, what you should parse that to is our sales suck. Because if you had great sales, you would not be talking about anything strategic nor partnerships. So my recommendation for you is, remember 3 very important words. Sales fixes everything. All you need to know.
Okay, I put this off as long as I can. Thank you so much for sticking with this. This is one of the most fascinating interviews I've ever done. But this is not just a special episode because I have Guy Kawasaki. It's also the first video podcast, and it's also release week of my upcoming book. No, my new book. My book is here. It's called Be a Nerd That Talks Good. It is going to help you turn those blank stares into blank checks. There are color examples in here. Look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this book. You can grab it right now. Amazon's got it. Ebook is only $1.99 until the end of the month. And you can pick it up in paperback as well. If you want a signed copy, get in touch with me. Again, Be a Nerd That Talks Good. You can get it at nerdthattalksgood.com/book. Let's get back to this conversation with Guy. Do you think there's a gadget or an app today that deserves that attention, that full-blown evangelist, but doesn't quite have one yet? Like, what are you seeing that you're like, maybe that you almost are like, man, if I had a second Guy, I would send him over there because that's the technology, that's the stuff that needs the voice.
Well, I mean, this is a big answer, but I think that AI is the hugest deal I have ever seen. And I think it's bigger than the freaking industrial revolution. And I use AI every day. And, I hear all these people doubting it and worried about hallucinations and all that. But as a real tool for a writer and a speaker like me, AI has absolutely changed the game for me, and it has made me a much better writer.
I'm glad you said that because now I'm gonna play another game. I had this in my pocket. I listened to your episode with Deepak Chopra on Remarkable People, which was phenomenal. And the way that you two were talking about your custom GPTs and putting all of yourselves out there.
Yeah.
When I was preparing this morning, on your website, you have a Kawasaki GPT. And so I thought I would do a little practice interview. I asked it this question. I said, I'm interviewing Guy Kawasaki this afternoon. If I only had one question to ask, what should I ask? And it recommended I ask, what's the single most important lesson you've learned about being remarkable in your career? And how can others apply it to their lives? Now, before you answer, do you want to hear what Kawasaki GPT said? Or do you want to give your answer?
I'll give my answer, and you can tell me if I agree with myself.
And if it's wrong, I'll completely cut this segment out.
No, I don't. No, absolutely do not cut this sentence off because there's a 50% probability that Kawasaki GPT's answer will be better than the answer I'm about to give you. And I freely admit that because in my mind, artificial intelligence is already sentient and it is much smarter than any given human. So anyway, so to answer that question, I would say that what I think is probably the most, well, I actually have two. I would say that the two most important qualities to be remarkable is to have a growth mindset, which means that you believe you can learn new things and do new things and try new things. And the second thing is you also need a grit mindset. Because if you have a growth mindset and you're going to try new things and you're going to risk failure, you need to have a grit mindset to keep at it when you encounter failure. So my answer from Guy Kawasaki, the human being, is growth and grit.
And I love that.
What did my chat GPT say?
Both themes from the book, which I thoroughly enjoyed. The GPT said, being remarkable boils down to one thing, making meaning. It's not about chasing money, fame, or success for its own sake. It's about creating something that makes the world a better place, whether that's a product, a service, or just how you treat people.
Well, see, I told you that Kawasaki GPT is better than me. That is better answer.
But you get credit both ways. You get credit either way, which is a win.
Well, I could make the case that, it's the specificity of the prompt, right? So like your prompt, I answered a slightly different question because I think I answered the question of what's it take to be remarkable? Whereas you asked, wait, what did you ask? What did you ask the GPT?
The single most important lesson you've learned about being remarkable.
So single most important. But I honestly would tell you that the single most important lesson that I learned about being remarkable is growth and grit. So I differ from my own GPT.
And that's why they make phenomenal companions. So I want to close. I want to thank you again for being so gracious with your time. A little bit of peeling the curtain back. what are you doing today? Sort of maybe personal projects or things in a different sphere
You mean
that you're excited
today?
about.
Like
In
right now,
well,
today?
not what are your lunch plans, but what where do you find that renewed juice and that energy?
So I don't know where you stand politically, but I am very concerned about the survival of democracy in our country.
Same.
And the project, I figured I can go on social media and, I can do all that kind of stuff. I don't think social media changes the needle or moves the needle anymore. So the project that I have identified for myself is I am writing a book about how to use Signal, because Signal, as the most encrypted, most secure communication method, I think is absolutely essential to the preservation of democracy. So I'm trying to help people embrace Signal so that they can help democracy survive.
Yeah, as long as you make sure you know who you're adding to the group chat, that's the important part. I love it, Guy. Obviously, the podcast, the Remarkable People podcast, your many books. How else can people follow you? What are you out there doing?
My best work is the Remarkable People podcast. I also have a Substack newsletter, also called Remarkable People. So between the Substack newsletter and the podcast, you're going to get more Guy than you want.
I don't even think that's possible. This has been phenomenal. I want to thank you. I've got a book coming your way, and so you'll get the version that you're not in, but I'll pencil you in the acknowledgments, and then when I do the second edition, I'll get that in there. Again, I am fangirling. This has been amazing. A friend of mine who was a security guy at Apple, Dave Doyle, says mahalo. It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining.
The pleasure has been all mine. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
I will. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
If you want links to the resources mentioned on the show, head on over to the episode page. And for information on booking a message therapy workshop, getting your hands on the message deck, to check out my upcoming book, or just buy me a coffee, go to nerdthattalksgood.com/podcast. Until next time, happy messaging. Remember, you don't have to speak well. You only got to learn how to talk good.